our church is reading through the chronological order of the Bible, and together it's called One Single Story, and we're taking communion every Sunday. We're doing a podcast every day, 7 days a week. We're preaching from the subjects that something you would have read the week before. Tyler's teaching here on Wednesday night from something you would have read the week before. We're journaling. And I hope that you're participating. If you're brand new here and you want to join in, please do. We would love for you to participate, jump in, and be a part of what we're doing. I honestly learn something new every week. I see things and I go, wow, I'd never seen that before for some reason, or it never stuck out to me. Recently, we've been reading about the Passover, and you may have seen my post about this week. We've been reading about Passover a lot, and you'll read about Passover throughout pretty much the entire Bible. It'll show up, and so yesterday at sundown, Passover ended. Okay, so that was the end of Passover. It went from the 15th through the 23rd, and the 15th and 16th they would have eaten their Passover meal. And many of them, they take it as a holiday. They leave. I didn't realize, I never read this in Exodus when they implemented the Passover, that one of the places they were supposed to go was Orlando. And I've been to Brooklyn. Brooklyn has a large Jewish community. I've never seen so many Jewish families outside of Brooklyn and Israel as I did in Orlando. And you know, they're easy. The Orthodox Jewish men particularly, you know, they don't cut their sideburns, so they turn into ringlets. And at the water park, they would tuck them behind their ears when they would get wet. It was just fascinating. And so I wanted to talk to all of them because I just like talking to people. So I would strike up a conversation. I'd ask them, you know, how did you celebrate Passover? You know, how many are in your family? How many? And I was getting these weird looks. And I just thought it was because I was being friendly. You know, it was making people nervous. And then I got home that night after I'd talked to about 20 different Jewish families about Passover and realized that I had my Old Colony Smokehouse pig hat on. And then I realized, oh, that's why they didn't have that for Passover, okay? There's 100% that. Anyway, that's just my funny story for the week. And it was just fun. Here's what I would tell you. I have some Jewish friends that actually live in Brooklyn and that I see on a regular basis. I talk to pretty much every week. But you should talk to some Jewish people about how they celebrate these festivals. What did they do? How do they live? You'd be surprised at how important these things are to them and how much many of them look like what you have read in the Old Testament. And so I would just encourage you to get out of your box, talk to them a little bit, ask them how they celebrate things like Passover or the Festival of Tabernacles, whatever you want to talk about. So today I read part of the text. We're going to look at the entire chapter 26, 1 Samuel. And I'm just going to be straightforward with you right now about this sermon. I have been wrestling with the person of David for several weeks. Just in a lot of different ways, trying to sort through how I view him, the things that are written about him, the things that we talk about where David is concerned, and the things that we never talk about where David is concerned. There are a lot of those that are present, and some of the conflict that I have internally about this is conversations that we've had as a staff and podcasts that we've done. But most of it has come from my reading, just things that I see, and it just looks, you know, I hadn't seen it before, you know, because if we talk about David, all right, we talk about the highlights. David killed Goliath. David is a man after God's own heart. David killed his tens of thousands, you know. And if we talk about one thing he did wrong, it's usually Bathsheba. That's the thing we talk about. That's it. That's all we talk about. But David had lots of slip-ups in his life, things that were trouble for him. David had his own struggles personally. You know, you can read, when you read through the Psalms, you see how dark his life could get at times. And he even, as a matter of fact, in today's reading, He talked about how he was depressed, how he's struggling with how difficult life is. And so I've been struggling with the character of David. Some of what I'm going to deliver to you today is a viewpoint of this story and a previous story that you could put together. You could talk about it either way, either one. That I probably deviate from what the popular opinion is about this story. Okay, and I'm going to explain. I'll make my case as to why I see that. My view of David has changed. For example, I think, as a matter of fact, in the podcast, when we talked about David and Goliath, Alyssa mentioned that in Sunday school, she grew up thinking like this was a 6 or 8 year old boy. And that's the way I had flannel boards, whatever y'all had grew up on, and maybe y'all had videos. But on my flannel board, like he was like this tall, and he was young, and Goliath was like this tall, and if you look at the reality of the story, that's not true. Secondly, David couldn't have been like 6, 8, 10, or 12. Either that, or he was a man among kids, because it says that he grabbed a lion and a bear by the jaw and beat him to death with a club. My 10-year-old grandson cannot do that, okay? I just want to be clear. Like, I don't know any 10-year-old that can. I don't know many 20 or 25-year-old men that could do that. Like, that's quite impressive. And so we have this innocent picture of David the little boy in our minds that we get taught in Sunday school. And then as we get older, we see this great king who has a passion to worship, who is a man after God's own heart. And that's kind of all we see. We think he has this one slip up, and he recovers from it, and God uses it for his glory. But over and over again, it seems to me David has some issues. And at least from my reading, this is only my take. I just want to be clear about that. Like, there are probably lots of theologians that 100% disagree with me about this. But I'm reading the same thing they're reading. From my take, one of David's greatest weaknesses was his family. He loved his family so much that he struggled to deal with issues that he should have dealt with head on, that he should have made the case with. So let me just back up here. So, the question is, should he have killed him or not? So the title of the sermon is David Spares Saul again. The question that we're going to wrestle with today is, should David have killed Saul, or should he not have killed Saul? And there's a couple of things I want to say before I preach the sermon. One, pretty much the only way they dealt with people who needed to be removed was to kill them. You understand that? In the Old Testament, they didn't vote them out. They didn't, they didn't impeach them. They killed them. That was it. Like, you're a bad king, you're going to die. So that was kind of how it was dealt with. Either that, or they cut their thumbs off and made them crawl around the table while they ate. There is a story. I don't know if y'all read that. 34 kings without thumbs crawling around under the table that had been conquered. That is pretty much how they deal with that. That was the way God told them to deal with it. When God sent the children of Israel into the promised land, he said, kill them all. Don't spare any. As a matter of fact, when they spared lives, it got them in trouble. And when evil rose up, the response was to kill him. And David seems to have no problem doing this whatsoever until it's his family. You can read, there's several stories to show you this. His son Amnon rapes his daughter Tamar, and he gets mad about it, but he does nothing. He doesn't do anything. As a matter of fact, it's going to be the thing that drives a wedge between he and Absalom, because Absalom's like, okay, then I'm going to deal with it. Absalom is his other son, and so he deals with it. He does what David should have done. You're like, oh, Pastor, you're saying he should have killed his son? What I'm telling you is that's how they dealt with it. Okay? That's how they dealt with it. The Old Testament, that's how they dealt with it. You're going to be evil, you're going to die. And that's the consequence. And so then he has this conflict with Absalom, and Absalom challenges him for the throne, and instead of David saying, I'm the king, he doesn't say, I'm God's anointed one at this point. Don't touch thine anointed. He don't use that language at this point. He runs. He leaves the city, abdicates his throne, and lets his son set up his territory. And then later, Joab deals with Absalom and kills him. And he reprimands David because David is more upset that Absalom has died than he is happy that his men who are around him protected him and did the job that they were supposed to do. He's like, you should be thanking the troops for doing what you should have done. That's what he says. And so over and over again, we see David's inability when it comes to his family to deal with the discipline that needs to be dealt with. Now, what I would say about that is, I would say that's a common problem. I would say it's a common problem. We can see every other kid sin but our own kids, right? I listen to parents talk about their children sometimes. I'm like, they got another child somewhere? Like, I hear them talking like, that ain't your child, no, that ain't the one I know, because we talk about them in such, we see the best because we want the best. And we don't want to harm them. We don't want to hurt them. And sometimes the things we do to try to make life easier for them, better for them, to get them to where they want to go, sometimes it harms them instead of helps them. Sometimes our unwillingness to deal with issues causes them problems later on. Sometimes they become an adult and they've been at home acting this way. And then people go, where did you get that from? Well, my mom always let me do it. Look, time out. I'm never going to finish this sermon. I know it. The average age right now of marriage is going up, and the number one reason is women don't want to raise the boys that mama didn't. And so they're waiting until they grow up to marry them. And they're like, no, we ain't marrying them at 18. We ain't marrying them at 28. We'll just wait until they've grown up, got a job, and figured it out. Sometimes they never do. And right? And so the average age of marriage keeps going up. And the number one reason why, if you ask women, the number one reason why is we don't want to be their mother. And sometimes the reason for that is because we have failed to deal with issues in their life because we struggle as parents. So this is a dance that's going on between these two, But in your reading this week, Saul and Jonathan both died. There's some strange verses there. David says the love of Jonathan was greater than any woman he was married to. Did anybody else read that? He loved Jonathan. And notice he doesn't say a whole lot about Saul. He says, Israel can mourn Saul, I'm mourning Jonathan. That's pretty much what he says. And so this is a dance, okay? So on multiple occasions, Saul has tried to kill David. I'm just going to be honest with you, like, if we're working together and you throw a spear across the room at me and miss and it sticks in the wall, that's your last chance, okay? We're not coming back. I'm not playing the harp for you, I'm not coming to dinner. I mean, that's it. We're done, all right? But David keeps coming back. David has an affection he wants this relationship with Jonathan so much that he's willing to tolerate Saul trying to kill him. He keeps coming back, and they play this dance. There's one story where basically they're playing hide and go seek. They're running around the mountain, one chasing the other. And so he's refused to kill him at least one previous time, in my opinion, multiple times. Listen, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you can grab a lion by with your bare hands and beat him to death with a club, you pretty much can take him out anytime you want to, okay? So he's passed up multiple opportunities to take out Saul by the time we get to this story. And he's given another opportunity. So let's look at the story. First of all, adults play childish games. When I read this story, I think, golly, both of them at times act so childish. Nanny, nanny, boo, boo. That's how I read it. Like, two grown men with armies going, you can't get me. Where am I hiding? And, it's this. There's a significant difference between childlike and childish. Right? So I have a distinct ability for my brain to go back to being a 16-year-old. And I don't know about you. What I would say is probably my mid-20s, because I was so restricted at 16 that I didn't have any thoughts that were out of the way. If I did, they got beat out of me quick. And but I would say my brain has a distinct ability to go back to my mid-20s. And it's one thing for somebody to have childlike faith. It's another thing for somebody to act childish. And some of the things that I see them do in Saul and David are somewhat childish, like, the hide and go seek kind of thing. Let's see if you can find me. And so what I read to you earlier, it says, now some men from Ziph came to Saul at Gibeah to tell him David is hiding in the hill of Aquila, which overlooks Jeshimon. So Saul took 3,000 of Israel's elite troops and went out to hunt him down in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped along the road beside the hill of Aquila, near Jeshimon, where David was hiding. When David learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, he sent out spies to verify the report of Saul's arrival. David slipped over into Saul's camp one night to look around, playing hide and go seek. And look, if you don't want to fight, don't go in their camp, right? I have some friends who are serious about their Second Amendment rights, and they would tell you, if you don't want to get shot, don't come in my house. Right? That's not I'm just saying, y'all got to know some people like that. I know some people like that. Like, I knock, I ring the doorbell multiple times. If they say come in, I don't. I'm just waiting on them to open the door, because I know how they feel. If you don't want to fight, don't go in the camp. Why is David in the camp? If he don't want to fight, what's he doing over there? He's playing games. We're going to see how this plays out. It says, when David learned, David slipped over to Saul's camp one night to look around. Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of his army, were sleeping inside a ring formed by slumbering warriors. Who will volunteer to go in there with me? David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother. I'll go with you, Abishai replied. So David and Abishai went right into Saul's camp and found him asleep with his spear stuck in the ground beside his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying asleep around him. Now, later you're going to find that the Lord kept them asleep. That's how it describes it. The Lord kept them asleep, because you got to be pretty slick, to get that close to somebody and them not wake up. And this is what Abishai says to him. God has surely handed your enemy over to you this time, Abishai whispered to David. Let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike twice. Saul found out where David was. He comes to find him. So David and Saul, they're struggling with their own issues. And David takes a man into the camp here. And Abishai says, let me have him. It only one shot. I only need to hit him once. Like, he will be done when I'm done. And I know some of you are thinking, like, why is that a big deal that he would kill the king? What about the rest of them? When he kills the king, aren't the rest of them going to wake up and suddenly he's going to have a fight on his hands? The answer to that is probably so, but the king held such a high position that when he died, they just looked for somebody else to lead them. And if they could deal with the king, if Saul was dealt with, all the other problems, the other battles would be resolved on their own, because they would need, as a matter of fact, once Saul dies, Judah says, come be king. Because they need somebody to follow. They're looking for somebody to follow. And so if they get rid of the king, then they have somebody that they can deal with. They could have killed all the men around them and not killed Saul, but that doesn't solve the problem that they have. And I would tell you, one of the struggles that we have in life is we spend a lot of time trying to conquer things that don't matter, and we don't deal with the things that do. We don't handle the business that needs to be handled, and we handle everything else. We get up and we've got this one big thing staring us in the face, and we get busy doing stuff that don't matter and never deal with the one thing that's staring us in the face. And sometimes you have to deal with the one thing you have to deal with. If you would get to the source, the control, the root, if you will, it would solve most of the other problems that are involved. Second thing, taunting is not humility. We talk about David, being so innocent. The fact that he's over in Saul's camp, stealing stuff from him, by the way, as we're going to read, tells you a little bit about his lack of innocence. It's difficult to read the Bible and view him as too innocent, right? He's on the run. When he's first on the run from Saul, he lies to a priest so he can get Goliath's spear and some food, for holy food that was dedicated for the priest to eat. He lies to the priest and says, Saul sent me to get it so his men could eat while he's on the run. That's how Saul finds out where he's at. Because I grew up with that little David. There was a guy in the tribe I grew up in. His name was Benny Triplett. He written some songs that I'm sure you've sang before. He was a big songwriter, but he wrote this song called "Only a Boy Named David." And I remember as a little kid that "Only a Boy Named David" song. Only a little sling. It's a little innocent kid. He's walking around. He goes out there. You can't read the Bible and see him as this totally innocent person that sometimes we make him out to be. He's a warrior. He's going to have issues with his relationships. He's going to have issues with anger at times. He's going to struggle with his depression from time to time. Here's the thing I would tell you that sets David apart, is he was quick to submit. When he got confronted about sin, when he got confronted about wrong on a regular basis, when they said something to him, David was quick to submit. That's the heart issue. When it talks about a man after God's own heart, what I would say about David, it's not his actions that are perfect. It's not even his actions that are innocent. It is his heart that is willing to submit to God under any situation. And I would tell you, I think that's a difference maker in people in general. It's not that they're perfect people. It's that they're willing to submit to God when they know they've done wrong. They're willing to say, God, please forgive me. This was wrong. When David's confronted about taking a census, when David's confronted about Bathsheba and Uriah, immediately upon confrontation, his heart softens. I think that's the thing David had going for him, is his heart. And it says this. It says, no, David said, don't kill him, for who can remain innocent after attacking the Lord's anointed one? Surely the Lord will strike down Saul someday, or he will die of old age in battle. The Lord forbid that I should kill the one he has anointed, but take his spear and that jug of water beside his head, and then let's get out of here. I don't want to kill him, but I want to play games with him. I don't want to deal with it, but I'm going to taunt him. I don't want to deal with it, but I'm going to make fun of Abner. I don't want to do what I need to do, but I'm still going to, we're going to do this dance. It says, so David took the spear and the jug of water that were near Saul's head. Then he and Abishai got away without anyone seeing them or even waking up, because the Lord had put Saul's men into a deep sleep. That's what I was talking about earlier. It says, David climbed the hill opposite the camp until he was at a safe distance. And then he shouted down to the soldiers and to Abner, son of Ner, wake up, Abner. He's playing games. It says, who is it? Abner demanded. Well, Abner, you're a great man, aren't you? David taunted. See what David's doing? He's taunting somebody. This innocence that we play him out to be here, like, I'm not going to kill God's anointed one. I'm just going to make fun of God's anointed one. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Neither of those are good if that's your answer. Y'all with me? It's so why haven't you guarded your master, the king, when someone came to kill him? This isn't good at all. I swear by the Lord that you and your men deserve to die because you failed to protect your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around. Where are the king's spear and the jug of water that were beside his head? I need to slow down here and just talk for a few minutes. There's a story a couple of chapters before where Saul's using the bathroom, and David comes and cuts off the tassel on his robe in a cave. That's weird altogether. Right? I don't like. Do y'all ever read the Bible and go, that is really strange? Like, and his men are like, you could have killed him. He's coming here. God sent him in here for you to kill. And he's like, no, I'm not going to kill him. And he uses this same statement again that he uses here. And the one he uses in the first story is much more direct. And it's the one that most often gets quoted. He says, I can't touch God's anointed, or touch not God's anointed one, or touch not thine anointed. That's how the King James I would have grown up on with. I'm gonna lay some things out. Y'all can like me or not like me. You can agree with me or not agree with me. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I've heard touch not thine anointed thousands of times in the context of church. Thousands. I have never heard it used one single time in the context of an honorable person. Every time I have ever heard it used, it was always to prop up someone who had character issues. Usually a preacher who was taking money from the church or acting in immoral ways, and people going, you touch not God's anointed. I've never heard it used for somebody who was just offering a complaint. I've never heard it used when somebody was just had a bad attitude. I've never even heard it used when the person was good and the person who was making accusations had nefarious means and they were trying to harm the pastor or the leader. I've never even heard it used in that. The only time I have ever heard this used was in the context of trying to prop up somebody who had bad moral character. Ever. The only time I've ever heard it used was to defend poor behaviors. I'm just going to tell you how I feel. David is using it as an excuse to prop up an immoral king. God has already rejected Saul. The anointing that he's talking about has already departed from Saul. It's gone. God said, no more. I'm done with it. But David is using it as an excuse not to deal with it. Now, let me just stop right here and say, in the church world today, there's a term that is popular right now. It's called church hurt. And it is people who feel like they have been abused by leaders in the church, who've been mistreated, either privately or publicly, or pastors or leaders who have acted in an improper way. And I don't deny that. I'm going to tell you it happens way too often, and it's a shame, and it is a disgrace, and there are people who have left the church and never came back because they have been hurt or harmed by leaders who have done them harm. The problem is that we're making people who should be in leadership positions, elders, deacons, bishops, into gods. We're making them kings in places that they have no business being God or king. And then, listen, when corruption arises, we don't deal with it because we like what we're getting out of it. Come on now. If we get rid of the pastor, what's going to happen to the church? And I sure love going to church there. Well, let me tell you something. If he's immoral, you got to deal with it. Come on now. Oh, I'm here to throw rocks, so let me throw them. Listen, pastors make mistakes. Own up to it and deal with it. They do. I don't know a perfect pastor, but trying to hide their imperfections by saying, touch not thine anointed, is a scam. I come loaded today. And I'm irritated because we got a group over here that are worshiping people who have no business being worshiped and excusing their behavior and not being with it. And we've got a group of people over here who are hurt and they won't do anything about it either other than throw rocks. Steal spears and go, eh. Everybody's playing games. Listen, if we can't deal with it, What I would rather see happen is somebody be confronted and you handle it and they change their behavior. That's the right way. But when behavior don't change, you have to deal with it. But here's what I'm going to tell you. The longer a corrupt leader stays in place, the higher the price is going to be when you have to deal with it. You can look around the world right now, and you can see the longer you wait to deal with corrupt, immoral leaders, the higher the price is for everybody to pay. The people of Israel suffered because of Saul. God had departed from him. God had rejected him as king. David had been given multiple opportunities to take care of it. The people would have been better. You're like, well, what would have happened? Listen, I don't believe God punishes him for it. That's just my personal opinion. And the longer we wait to deal with corruption, the more difficult that it's going to be. I grew up in denominations where you could sin and lie and they would give you a promotion. That's not a knock against denominations. I'm just saying. Churches are notorious for saying, we've had, I don't know how many staff members come through here that have left and gone to other churches. Not a single church or pastor has ever called for a reference. We do. You're not going to go get a job at the school system and them not call your references? We don't call because we assume, okay, they're telling us the truth. They must be good. And we don't, as somebody, we read a book as a staff, and it was about somebody that I held in high regard. But I'm going to tell you, by the time I was finished reading the book, at that person, I was just irritated because what he had chosen to do was circle the wagons and hide the sin instead of saying, yeah, I did it, and I'm sorry. You're like, Pastor, should he have killed him? That's just my opinion. He should have dealt with it. I'm going to tell you right now, some of you right now are dealing with things that had you dealt with 20 years ago, you wouldn't be dealing with it today. If you would have stuck a spear in it and killed it. I ain't talking about your spouse. Ain't what I'm talking about. If you dealt with it, if you dealt with your sin, right? When you get to the New Testament, things are, and this is so hard for us to get our heads around because the way we deal with people who are corrupt is that we fire them, we put them in jail, we vote them out, we impeach them. That's how we deal with it. We don't kill them. In the Old Testament, that's how there was no impeachment process. All right, I'm going to go back. If we can get 51 votes, Saul's done. That's not how it worked. Okay? It was, you did wrong, you die. That was it. The longer you wait to deal with things that are corrupt, the higher the price is going to be in your life, in your family, in your business, and in the church. I need to go. I got to get out of here. I can talk about this all day. I have so many stories I could tell of pastors and leaders that didn't need to be pastors and leaders. And nobody ever did anything. There's healing that comes when we deal with the things in our lives. Last thing, momentary peace and reconciliation are not the same thing. I know some folks, I'll hear people, I'll ask them, like they may have been through marriage conflict, and I'll ask them how their marriage is doing, and they'll say, everything's fine. It's kind of quiet. Well, silence, okay? Some people think the lack of conflict means that everything is good. I would tell you, if you're married to me, the lack of conflict is dangerous, right? Because conflict is my love language. I'm an 8, so I like to debate, and I have to work on some of those things. But like if I'm silent, You know, if somebody's mad at me, I'd rather them scream and holler at me than to give me the silent treatment. Right? That's just who I am. And sometimes people think silence or peace or, you know, they're not fussing at me. Everything must be good. Sometimes they're just planning a way out. They're just looking for the door. They're just trying to find their way, and they're trying not to disrupt it until they get there. And sometimes we confuse the two. We think everything is fine. We've got momentary peace, but we haven't been reconciled. Saul is toxic. Listen, if you can defend somebody who at dinner picks up their spear and tosses it at a guest, right? They're toxic. Saul is toxic. Saul, he loves you one second, he hates you the next. I love you, man. I hate you, man. You know, he's ready to fight you and hold you in the same breath. Yeah, bring him back. I miss him. Let me try to kill him. You know, it's just strange. It's a strange thing. He's dealing with his own issues. And one of the things I would tell you is that if we're not careful, we will allow our desperation for acceptance to cause ourselves to be placed in dangerous situations. We want to be accepted so bad. Come on now. I guarantee you, everybody in this room knows somebody who's been in a dangerous relationship because they wanted acceptance. I see it in boys more than anybody. Boys seeking approval from somebody else will find themselves. It's why we have a gang problem. It's not because we love to shoot and kill people. It's because we want acceptance from somebody. And so we join somewhere that we can be accepted by. We marry people because our parents rejected us, our father rejected us, our mother rejected us, and we want to be in this relationship. They accept me, and so I want to be here. David is desperate. In my opinion, it's not that he loves Saul so much as he desperately wants Jonathan's affection. He wants his friendship. He wants that closeness that they have. And it says Saul recognized David's voice and called out, "Is that you, my son David?" What? You see what you're dealing with here? I brought 3,000 of my greatest troops, to come and kill you. Is that you, my son David? David replied, "Yes, my lord the king. Why are you chasing me? What have I done? What is my crime? But now let my lord the king listen to his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, then let him accept my offering. But if this is simply a human scheme, then may those involved be cursed by the Lord, for they have driven me from my home, so I can no longer live among the Lord's people. And they have said, 'Go worship pagan gods.' Must I die on foreign soil from the presence of the Lord? Why has the king of Israel come out to search for a single flea? Why does he hunt me down like a partridge in a pear tree, partridge on the mountains?" I'm sorry, I couldn't pass it up. It says, then Saul confessed. Look, Saul confessed, "I have sinned. Come back home." If this doesn't sound like an abusive, come on now. "I'm sorry. Please come home." I don't need to go down that path. "I've sinned. Come back home, my son, and I will no longer try to harm you, for you valued my life today. I have been a fool and very, very wrong." "Here's your spear, O king," David replied. "Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord gives his own reward for doing good and being loyal, and I refuse to kill you even when the Lord placed you in my power. For you are the Lord's anointed one. Now may the Lord value my life, even as I valued yours today. May he rescue me from all my troubles." Saul has got some issues. He's insecure. He's morally corrupt. I would tell you that maybe the most dangerous, but certainly some of the most dangerous people are morally corrupt people who are insecure. When you add insecurity to moral corruption, you have a recipe that will kill anybody. They have no mercy. When you have the two of those together, the world is in trouble. And David is so desperate to try to make this work. He reasons with Saul. He talks to Saul, And just so y'all know, this isn't the first time Saul said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, I don't know what I was thinking, come back home. This isn't the first time. This is a multiple occasion. He's a repeat offender here. And David's not going back, by the way. But David so desperately wants reconciliation that he's asking for peace. Listen, our goal as believers should be to reconcile the relationships in our life. That should be our goal as believers. But sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you're going to spend your energy trying to reconcile with somebody who every time you get in their presence is going to throw a spear at you. And the best thing you can do is move on. If you're not careful, listen, think about it. David's left his wife. You understand that? He left his wife in this passage, in this story. He's gone. He's running around. If they have children at this point, he don't know them. He's not there to raise them. He's out running around in the wilderness with a band of people who are disgruntled and frustrated and angry just like he is. All of them are on the run. And he's out running in this from Saul and missing out. Notice what he says. He says, I can't even hang out with the people of the Lord. I can't hang with people that I love and people that I know. I can't have relationships with the people that I so desperately want to have relationships with because I'm out here on the run. Sometimes we chase stuff that takes us away from the things that are the most important. We're out chasing after this. If I could just get this job, if I could just get this promotion, if I could just have this money, if I could just buy this house, if I could just whatever. And we're missing out on the things that God has placed right in our lives. What would happen if we focused on the things that God had placed in our lives instead of chasing things God doesn't want us to have? And it says, and Saul said to David, blessings on you, my son. You will do many heroic deeds, and you will surely succeed. Game over. Then David went away. Saul returned home. I don't know how you feel about this story. Some of you may be sitting there going, Pastor, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And that's fine. I'm good with that. It won't be the last ridiculous thing you ever hear me say. But as a leader in a church community, I'm tired of the church complaining about corruption and not dealing with it. I'm over people whining about this ain't right and this ain't right, and we don't deal with it. I would rather expose it and burn it to the ground and start over again than I had to keep propping up immoral people by saying, touch not mine anointing. Y'all with me? That's just where I'm at.